I've called the event So You Want to Train as a Psychedelic Psychotherapist. I probably should have called it a UK psychotherapist because that's where I'm coming from. This is quite peer-based information. It's not that I'm a training provider. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just a working therapist with psychedelic experience and psychedelic interest and a researcher. This is the next slide, actually. This is about me. So I work in London. I see people face to face. Clearly, over lockdown, I've been seeing a lot of people via Zoom. And then I do PhD research on ayahuasca specifically. So that's my psychedelic. This will be a bit ayahuasca centric because it's what I know. I guess my idea with this meeting is I'm just going to tell you what I know, and because I can't tell you what I don't know, and then other people may need to fill in the blanks in terms of psilocybin, MDMA therapy, ketamine therapy. It's all to play for. But my specialty is ayahuasca, and it's a UK focus, as I say, and it's a psychotherapy focus. So it's a kind of talking therapy focus that I'm going to talk about. But there are other options. So I kind of set this slide out in terms of roughly four sorts of ways that you might, if you were interested in getting into psychedelic helping or healing. These are the main ways you could do it. You could be shamanic. You could go off and train with a curandero in Peru. That's Ricardo Amaringo, I think, from Nihue Rao, with Dr. Joe Taufur helped set up. So Dr. Joe Taufur, I spent some time with in Costa Rica. He's got a great book, The Fellowship of the River, which is well worth checking out. And he was a medical doctor. He was in that third quadrant, but he started a shamanic center and then became a shaman, I think it's fair to say. He learned Icaros. So he kind of he's in between the boundary between shamanic and medical, perhaps. Religious is another way of doing psychedelics. Santo Daime, the Native American church, maybe for peyote. Different ways of, in different legalities and different jurisdictions. These are religious communities that meet perhaps fortnightly, perhaps a few times a month, to in a ritual setting to take psychedelics. I mean, of course, I assume it's a given that I'm talking about psychedelics in a ceremonial, ritual, healing sense, not a sort of recreational festival sense. I've got no problem with that, but the therapeutic angle is coming from a kind of organized, principled, thoughtful, mindful way of doing these things. So I'm just kind of really setting out that this talking therapy, but there's shamanic, religious, medical, and then neo-shamanic. I think that picture is from when we were young, which I've not seen, but it looked great. And that's a ceremony that was held, I don't know, in California or something, in someone's home. They're wearing white, which is interesting because that parallels the Daime look from the picture above. But you can see it's someone's house. They've got just a normal fireplace. They've got accoutrements. They've invented something new there. So I'm calling that urban shamanism. It's kind of syncretic. It might have Buddhist elements. It might have Shipibo textiles. It might have a Western sort of view. There might be recorded music that you play rather than sung music or rather than performed music with a guitar. So the neo-shamanic. Now I've highlighted that in pink because that's the main bit that I'm talking about. I'm not really I can't tell you about medical. You could become a psychiatrist. You could become a clinical psychologist. I'm not talking about religious because I'm not in a religion. If you want to set up a branch of Santo Daime, then feel free, except it's probably illegal. And then shamanic, you would, as far as I know, you need to go and train with a shaman for 10 years or so in the jungle, probably, depending on which tradition it is and which psychedelic it is. And that will be your training. But for neo-shamanic purposes and kind of how we reinvent ayahuasca or psychedelics for the UK and what your role in that is all to play for. Broadly, Peru and Brazil are kind of shamanic and religious. Broadly, UK, USA, Western Europe are below there. Kind of, we tend to either take a medical or neo-shamanic view. So within that, I think that you've got these roles, which I've, again, just tried to, this is really simplistic in a sense, but you could be a shaman, you could be a sitter, you could be a psychiatrist or clinical psychologist, or you could be a psychotherapist. Again, psychotherapy is in pink because it's the one that I'm most qualified to talk about. We need sitters. That is people that just hold the space. So they're, in a sense, whereas a shaman is doing something, they might be singing ikros, they might be kind of working with the energies in their view, they might be actively engaged in a job of healing. They're the healer. A sitter is just someone holding the space, just someone sort of sitting back. They're not doing anything to you. They're just observing. If you need help getting up, they'll help you get up. So you could train as a sitter. In a sense, the best way to train as a sitter is to sit for people, and there are options to do that. I know that the Psychedelic Society in the UK, they've just split off a kind of and rebranded it as Olulu or something. Their psilocybin truffle retreats in the Netherlands, and that's run by 4 women. It's great to see a female-led endeavor there, and they are. Yeah, I get the sense. I don't know. I've not been, but I get the sense that they sit during ceremony and they just hold the space, and then you do your own work. You're sort of your own shaman in that sense. Psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, medical training. So that goes more along the lines of Imperial College and King's College London in terms of where they're going. That's a different training. Again, I don't know too much about it. You'd have to look it up. But there are psychedelic. Ben Sessa, psychedelic psychiatrist. Simon Ruffle, psychedelic psychiatrist, and my colleague. So there are options there if that's your thing. If you really want to go down a neuroscience basis, Robin Carter Harris, Professor David Nutt. These are medical and neuroscientific ways into psychedelics and helping people. The other option, and the one that I can mainly talk about, is psychotherapy. That's talking therapy. You've got 2 people there, and they are just talking to each other. I guess I wanted to put this diagram in because it's what a lot of people start with. If you're thinking of training as a psychedelic therapist, you might have come across this before. I've always found it helpful. It's always sort of on my mind. How to find the nexus of what's right for you, what's your mission, what's your purpose in life, some combination of what you care about, what you're good at, what pays well, what the world needs. If you do what you care about, then it pays, which is sort of, but you're not good at it, then that will remain a dream. If you do something you're good at that pays well, which is broadly my history, I'll talk about that in a moment, then you'll be rich but bored, I think is a good description. And if you do something that you care about and you're good at but doesn't pay any money, then it's not sustainable. Money is a huge issue. Training is expensive. I charge £90 an hour to see clients one-to-one. Clearly, that means that only rich people can really engage in it of a certain level. We're all in this system. I'd like to see what we can do to alleviate that, to mitigate it, but I don't know what that looks like. And then in the middle is something that you care about, that you're good at, and that pays well. So that's what we're trying to find, and this is what I'm trying to invite you to think about in your own life. So within psychotherapy, so if you think of zooming in from the previous slide, if you zoom into psychotherapy, which is, again, the only thing I'm qualified to talk about, and I'm only qualified as a psychotherapist, as someone that qualified and does it. There are broadly 3 schools. I think in simple terms, there are 3 schools. So if you're not thinking to be a sitter, not thinking to be a psychiatrist, you're thinking to be a psychotherapist, or actually if you were thinking to be a sitter or psychiatrist, some aspects of this may still serve you to find out more about. There are broadly 3 schools of psychotherapy. Some people say there are 4. I sort of don't agree. There's certainly not 1. And I've numbered them here as psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic and psychodynamic are words you'll hear associated with that. Number 2, behavioral and cognitive behavioral, so CBT would fit into that. And you can see there, that's one of Pavlov's dog's experiments with a saliva tube, and then you've got, I could zoom in a bit here actually, the ABC of CBT, lots of forms and worksheets. For CBT, there's a little model there of psychological flexibility, acceptance, self as context, values, and things. So that's the sort of thing that the CBT, cognitive behavioral approaches, would go with, whereas psychoanalysis would focus on ego, superego, id, the conscious, the preconscious, the unconscious. So they've got clear concepts of the unconscious. I'm from the existential school, which is in the third option. So this is the humanistic angle, and this is, as you can see, more humane. It's human. It's humanistic. It's not. You can see Freud there. He's sat behind the couch and kind of pontificating about something with his cigar. The humanistic approach is a bit different, and it's a lot. I mean, obviously, two people would never sit quite so close in these times as they are shown there. That would be crime. But basically, tissue box, plant, lamp, two people, comfortable chairs. That's that's the space that I work in. So it's not got this kind of technocratic element of the cognitive behavioural, and it's not got the theories basically of psychoanalysis. It's more spontaneous. It's more live. It's still principled. Things like unconditional positive regard. But it's not quite so things about transference, projection, lots of the theories that Freud and his followers came up with. In a sense, I actually really like Freud. I think Freud was a phenomenologist, and he was an explorer, not a psychedelic explorer, I suppose, but he was into things like free association, which is quite dreamlike, and then analysis. So I think that combination of free association and then analysis is quite pertinent, because I guess I'm not particularly talking about doing psychedelics and doing therapy at the same time. I'm mainly talking about doing psychedelics like MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, or ayahuasca, and then doing some integration, when your ego's back online, your default mode network, your self is back online, there's something to integrate, something to talk about. You'll be able to speak. Often you can't speak during an ayahuasca experience, for instance. So it's about that mode of working with people in psychedelics and then out of psychedelics. There are some other things there: integrative, transpersonal. That's what some people call the fourth school. I think that's broadly humanistic, personally. Psychosynthesis, core process. These are things you can Google if you're interested. If they float your boat, you could go and study the Karuna Institute for core process. You could study the Psychosynthesis Trust or the Psychosynthesis Institute if you want a transpersonal model. By transpersonal, you'd think that they were very well suited to psychedelics, because they're beyond the personal, beyond a kind of everyday normal understanding of the world, more into things like gods and spirits and demons and mythologies. They're much more interested in that. Where I think they slip up is in having been a bit too systematic. Assagioli's egg, for instance, it's a bit too linear for me. There's pluralistic, which is being able to step into different modes at different times as a single person and not be bothered by the contradiction if two things don't add up. There are body therapies, of course, which I've not mentioned. That might be massage, it might be Reiki, it might be a range of other things, and then EMDR, for trauma, which doesn't really fit into any of the three above. I'll move on. Within the humanistic, so again, zoom into the humanistic on this side, zoom in a bit more. Each of those things that I've set out there is a school of humanistic psychotherapy. So this kind of choose your wizard school at this point. These are different attitudes. Person-centered is Carl Rogers. There's art therapy. There's drama therapy and psychodrama. There's systemic and family therapies. Corporal psychosynthesis I already mentioned within the transpersonal school, which in a sense prioritizes the spiritual over the mundane. There's existential, which I'll talk about in more detail. Gestalt, I really love Gestalt. That has a focus on the now and the holistic, and what's foregrounded and what's backgrounded within a certain process. So if that's your thing. Transactional analysis, that has a model of parent, adult, and child, which some people find very helpful. And then narrative therapy, which is about changing your narrative, your life story, working out what your life story is, and then working out how you can edit it, perhaps. I think that's what it is. I can only really talk about existential. And then you can do any of those therapies in the modes of, it can be one-to-one therapy, it can be couples, and that might be a relationship couple, it might be mother and daughter, or groups. And then it could be adults that you're working with, or children, or somewhere in between. And it can be brief, one session. Some people do one session therapy, some people do 6 sessions. I do open-ended therapy, which can be 2 years or more of seeing each other weekly. Within all of those humanistic therapies, there's a lot of common ground. This is sort of the dodo verdict. So that's a fabulous, quite psychedelic dodo there. And that just enumerates some of those basic counseling skills of attending, the use of silence, which is harder than it might sound. Questions, focusing. Focusing is really good. That's a whole thing. focusing, summarizing, reflecting, and paraphrasing. My camera's in the way. Rapport building, yes. Someone called that grooming the other day. I thought that was interesting. Rapport building for your clients. So all those are basic counseling. I would argue that you will use a lot of those, whether you're a psychiatrist, a sitter, a shaman, or a psychotherapist, whatever kind of psychotherapist you are. And that's what the dodo. So there's a link there, and I'll send this presentation around afterwards. But that is saying that sort of if you put two people in a room and they listen to each other, then generally good things happen. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. A lot of people ask me, where did you come from? Like, how have you done it? And I just want to sort of answer that question once and for all here, in terms of saying that covering my personal route into this. This doesn't say you should do it this way, but it's just, this is what I did. 1998, I was 18. I started off as a web developer. I moved into project management and production. I broadly had a 20-year career in IT and technology before retraining as a psychotherapist from the age of 34, 35. And that was 5 or 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, maybe. Alongside my day job, I did a part-time course at the Open University. I studied international relations and got into social sciences. I also did a startup whilst doing my full-time job, which is cardsinthepost.com. So that sends postcards. You upload a photograph and it sends a printed postcard in the post. So I tried various things. I was trying, I wasn't just locked into the career of digital production. I was also questioning that, as maybe some of you are. And then I started my training in 2014 or so. I did my psychotherapy training. I'll talk in more detail about that. And then I became a psychotherapist a few years ago. And now I'm doing a PhD and going further into research, partly because my psychotherapy course encouraged research. And I thought that's a really good thing. It's really changed things for me. And that's what I now do as things alongside. So I've always had a side hustle alongside the main hustle. And what's actually not shown in that diagram is that between going freelance and psychotherapy training, there was a slash. There was a period where I went down from 5 days to 4 days to 3 days to 2 days to 1 day to half a day to 2 hours every fortnight of doing paid work in my old day job, but that was freelance, and I managed to make that work through sheer hustle, really. And I don't know whether you'll be able to do that in the career you're in, but it worked for me because the therapy training is time-consuming and expensive, and that's what I'm showing on this slide, which is sort of 3 strands. What I did is personal psychotherapy, like have your own therapy. If you're not in therapy and you want to be a therapist, get into therapy. It's the best thing you can do. You need to experience it as a client first. I had one therapist for 2 years. I had my second therapist for 5 years, and now I'm in a group. Second strand, do some training. So these are the standard pathways into UKCP, which is one of the main organizations. BACP, I qualified after 2 years after the first certificate. UKCP took 5 years, so it's a sort of more extensive training. Then you get on the registers. I'm not actually sure clients care about the registers. I care because it gives me accountability, and it gives me some say in government decisions, and they think of lots of things that I don't, and you often need to give you a certificate if you want to hire rooms, etc. So yeah, there's some ambivalence, I guess, for me with a professional accreditation. But the basic outline of the route into psychotherapy for me was a 100-hour certificate in psychotherapy and counseling, which I did at Regent's University, 2 years of a master's, which I then did a dissertation, which I did on ayahuasca, and then 2 years of extra training in existential. So I then specialized in existential psychotherapy, which I'll talk a bit more about, and then went off to do my PhD, which brings it up to date. And then the third strand, alongside all of that, I was doing psychedelic experiences. For the purposes of YouTube, I'm not encouraging anyone to take psychedelics. But if you want to be a psychedelic psychotherapy, then most places would expect you to, even the MAPS program, for instance, in America, it requires you to have some MDMA experience of your own. Obviously, it's legal and it's taken in the right setting. You've got to think about all these things. But I've just listed out there the sorts of things you can take. Ayahuasca mainly for me, mushrooms, MDMA, DMT, ketamine is sort of in there as well. So having your own psychedelic experience, having your own experience of psychotherapy, and then doing the training and sitting in groups over, I don't know, does 5 years sound a long time? I don't know. I don't think it is. It flew by for me. I loved it. I enjoyed the training immensely. And I don't, in itself, it was, even if I never did a single hour of psychotherapy afterwards, I got so much out of it personally. This kind of idea that the path of being healed is the same as the healer, is quite powerful for me. That was my timer, so I won't take too much longer. I wanted to say a bit about existentialism just because it differs a bit from the medical and shamanic and religious modes. I just wrote down some things. You can read long essays on existentialism. There's lots of books. If you want to follow up any of that, the people are listed down in the bottom right. But for me, existentialism is a sort of anti-system system. It's quite critical, as in it stands on the outside and looks in and goes, oh, that's not. It sort of will never be mainstream, I guess, is my thought about it. And that's because existence precedes essence, as Sartre said, which is about that we're always alive first and then things happen. And we might tell ourselves, well, I'm an introvert, but there is no essence of introvert. You've just looked at the past and decided that that's an appropriate word for it. Or gay, for instance, may define your past experience, but it might not define your future existence. As Alan Watts said, you have no obligation to be the same person that you were 5 minutes ago. And any system is always past based. It's always past based, whatever it is. And as a therapist and as a psychedelic therapist, I'm always kind of going, right, but what haven't we understood yet? What have we not even systemized yet? So I think existentialism is really good for that. I think it's especially good for that. It's interesting what's new and next, sort of along the same point, not what's old and past. A wounded healer, we're for me, I'm not kind of laying down the law saying, right, well, you need to change your thought patterns. Your thoughts seem irrational to me. You need to make your thoughts more rational. That's not what I do. I see myself as a wounded healer, as a fellow human, as someone struggling and suffering alongside a client. The roots of existentialism are in European philosophy. And the point about that is it's not medicine, it's not religion, and it's not psychology. Right? So if you're depressed, that's not a medical issue. Medicines might help, SSRIs or something might help you, but only in the same way coffee might help you, or indeed MDMA might help you. But it's a consent based, and it's not kind of a prescription based. I'm a doctor. I'm prescribing you something, and it's within a kind of chemical imbalance theory of mind. Existential therapy is not in that mode. It's not religious. There's no services or dogmas really. Other than the literature that there is, and it's not psychology. So that's important, because I think maybe a lot of people don't. Some people talk about existential psychology, and I don't really know what they mean. It's psychology is systemized. I think it's about parts of the brain. It's about behaviors. It doesn't really fit very well a lot of the time. So whether it is psychology or isn't is a question. And then phenomenology is a hugely important thing. That phenomenology is a theory and practice to explore existence, and I would argue to explore psychedelics. So that's what existentialism brings. That's my plug. And I think this is my final slide, you'll be pleased to know, before we get into questions, which is broadly that if you want to train as a psychedelic psychotherapist in the UK at the moment, there is no program, right? There is no where you can go and sign up and have a fully structured thing where they'll take you as a non-therapist of any kind, and you'll end after 5 years as a psychedelic psychotherapist, able to give psychedelics, and able to sit and able to help people process it. That doesn't exist as far as I know. In the USA, the MAPS program, there is MAPS Europe, by the way. I didn't have time to put this on the slide. MAPS Europe is a thing, and they are starting therapy training programs. I don't think in the UK. I think that's in continental Europe. Someone else will give me details. But MAPS, the link is there to their training. The California Institute of Integral Studies, that has a program called the Certificate in Psychedelic Assisted Psychedelic Therapy Research, and that's a thing if you want to move to California. It's actually only weekends, I think, so you could maybe do it, but it's not distance learning. It's in person in California. But it looks pretty good, and there's some good graduates of that. And then in the UK, Ben Sessa last week or the week before announced a partnership with Awaken Life Sciences to start in Bristol some sort of training program, but we don't have any details yet. Ben Sesser's a great guy. Obviously psychiatrist, medical model. So it's a bit different to the angle I'm coming at it from. But, that could be brilliant. That could be, and if you're in Bristol, then maybe it's something you want to get in touch with him about and let him know that you're interested. But that's all one half of things. I've labeled that the cathedral. Might be a bit unfair, but I've labeled that the cathedral, because on the other side is the bazaar, which is basically what I've done and what I've set out earlier, which is, number one, get some therapy of your own. Number two, gain some psychedelic experiences. Number three, train using the existing pathways. Train as a psychotherapist. You want to be a psychedelic psychotherapist, train as a therapist. I've listed the new school of psychotherapy there because it does online courses rather than being London-centric. Regent's University is London-based, and it's sort of, they operate on 3 terms a year of 10 weeks per term. But as I've said, it's like 10 grand a year at Regent's University. Cheaper options are available, other options are available, but are they right for you? You'd have to decide. And then step 4 is I've just put connect, build, grassroots. As I said, I'm just a working psychotherapist. I don't run a training institute. So my idea is that all of you on the call today, the people that have joined today, connect, and build something and grow it and see what that becomes, because I'm intrigued as to whether I guess I'm wary of a big top-down model where there's only one thing. It's like, if you want psychedelics, you've got to go to a psychiatrist, they've got to prescribe it, you've got to sit in a hospital, even if it's, they put some drapes up and a salt lamp. Or versus the Dami tradition, which is it's legal and people set up in their own community. They set up a community of people. Rather than having kind of paid integration of a psychotherapist who costs £90 an hour, you could just have a group of people who help each other out. So I'm just wondering what that might look like as an alternative, or at least to help you imagine what an alternative to a top-down, university-based, bureaucratic, very fixed kind of structured training might look like. So that's the bazaar. And then step 5, I've rubbed out profit, because I keep hearing about kind of extractive capitalism entering the psychedelic training market. There's I was watching something this morning about Lucian. What's his name? He's got a sounds Polish surname, and the likes of Rebel Wisdom, and and I'm contacted by kind of rich capitalists that and Awaken me. I don't know where that sits in that, but I've no problem with people making money. As I've said, the train's expensive, you need to make a living. I've no problem actually with people having a lot of money. I don't think it's antithetical to psychedelics, but I do wonder whether the master's house can be taken down with the master's tools to some extent, and some critique of that is welcome. I will now stop my share, and I don't know. I invite you all to unmute you all, and then I can't unmute you all. Feel free to unmute yourselves, and we can have a chat. Do it individually.
You're right, Adam.
Hi. Right.
Hi.
I'll turn off the. Hang on. Let me turn off the spotlight so that. Right. There we go. Yes. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Was that helpful?
Sorry, I just had a call coming in. Yeah, go on. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, you've covered quite a lot of ground there in a small amount of time, it seems. Yeah, really helpful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm interested as to how it connects to all the other people that are sitting and part of this, coming from all the different backgrounds. I understand that coming from my background, being one where I'm currently a carpenter, and I dived into needing to find something, and that was psychedelics, as it turned out, and ayahuasca, and past few years journeying with it and receiving the gifts for myself, my existence, my family, on every level, just huge changes, and I just want to be able to share that. So yeah, in line with a friend that was a doctor within the NHS 3 to 4 years ago, and she had similar experiences, and then became a sort of medicine woman, and
Right.
started traveling. I know she's living back in the UK, back in London now, and is also looking to kind of offer these experiences for people, realizing how kind of short-sighted the NHS is in many ways, and what we can do with this as an aid, and then seeing what's going on, this movement around the world, and obviously the work that's been done at King's. Is it King's?
There's there's King's College London and an Imperial College, yeah.
Yeah. All of these things have had an influence on me, just seeing this new wave of healing, essentially, and therapy. When I got in contact with you only a matter of weeks ago, that was really under the guise of me just sat there scratching my head going, how the hell do I get into this? I'm scoping through the internet and trying to find a way in, not being a psychotherapist or working in and being a doctor or medical in any way, but really this movement within myself is coming from my heart, and I'm having to connect my head and go, right, let's connect into the world and see how I can bring this into a reality for myself, which is really why I'm sat here with you guys. That's
head and heart is right, I think, Chris. Kind of, or the spirit and the body or earth, mundane. Kind of trying to yoke the two together. Obviously, reminds me of yoga, I suppose, but it's it requires that. That's why money is that kind of root, I guess, kind of root chakra. Can you exist? And then, but what's it for? Or the top of Maslow's pyramid of that self-actualization, like the purpose, what it's all about for you, which is a personal choice, and then working out if you're stepping forward on that path in the best way you can. Where are you left, Chris? Just out of interest, I'd be interested to talk to other people as well. But where are you at now? I'm aware we had a conversation. I talked to you about some books and things. What's your thinking?
So I ended up in Glastonbury, as it happens, last Friday, and in a bookshop, and I ended up picking up some quite key books, I think, which can help me to understand the workings of ayahuasca, whether it's within shamanism or working with DMT. Spirit Molecule book I've just picked up by Rick Strassman.
Yes, I'll just show that to the camera if that's there.
I just feel like I need, for myself, to do a serious amount of reading and learning about this. I want to come in the most authentic way to be working with people, really understanding these different medicines from a basic scientific level, something which your layman can understand without getting too technical.
I found this book really helpful. It's really good.
The Michael Pollan book, is it?
No, it's not. No, Michael Pollan is just stories, really. This is much better. No, the Michael Pollan book is okay, but this is a brain book, right? This is this is all about, this is sort of basic neuroscience. I mean, it's not called neuroscience. It's called the brain book, but it's so interesting. It's so good. And for 20 quid, I've learned more about the neuroscience of psychedelics than watching 100 YouTube videos.
Well, amazing.
What's that book, Adam?
It's the Dorling Kinsley, How the Brain Works.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it. It's just really good. It's honestly, it's like the pinnacle of humanity. The amount of science that's gone into this, and it's pink, is immense. I think it's fabulous. No, Michael Pollan's book obviously is. So that's called How the Brain Works. Michael Pollan's book is called How to Change Your Mind, which is a slightly different thing with that standard chart of brain scans. Let's all do a brain scan, sort of thing.
Yeah. So just to kind of continue that train of thought and to answer your question, where I'm at now is I've just spoken to the girls who are behind Alalaho, which is the team.
Alalaho. I need to practice that. Okay, Alalaho. Yeah. So that's the psychedelic center, the Psychedelic Society spin-off thing of psilocybin retreats.
Yeah, so they've got the retreats in Amsterdam. I want to experience that, how they're doing that, and so I'm going to be volunteering with them when it all restarts in September, October, hopefully.
Oh, you're volunteering with them? Brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that'd be a good way to get some experience.
Yeah.
Firsthand, and I think it's probably the most aligned to how I'm going to be able to work with people, with minimum. Certification behind me.
Sure. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm still keen to explore deeper into psychotherapy, but weighing up obviously the finance, 50 grand, 5 years. I'm certainly willing to make the commitment with financially and with my time. It's just whether it's just fitting it into this journey that I'm on right now.
For me, for what it's worth, I think the certificates are ethics overcooked. As in it seems to me that the main point of making you go through it for 5 years is just to check that no people with bad intentions get through, and then they give you a certificate saying you seem like a decent sort of chap to me. If you're ethical, then although for me it was a transformative experience to do the psychotherapy training, I did sort of more or less end the process more or less the same person that I started in a weird way as well. I think some of my sharp edges were rubbed off by it, but I think 90% of what my clients get from me as a therapist is me. And then there's a bit of training that's added on top.
Yeah, and I think it's you that has had all the insights and gifts from these medicines for you to be able to hand across. But you've got this backing of it's like you've got your library behind you that goes, yes, I've done my training, and obviously it gives you a sense of academic experience, which is always going to be helpful, which is also what I'd like to be able to feel like when I'm supporting people through a journey and after a journey. Yeah, just to feel that confidence. I think it's a lot of the time it's about confidence for me.
Absolutely.
And authenticity.
Let me ask. I'll switch into grid view so I can see if anybody wants to ask a question or reflect or anything. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Billal.
You're right. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to pick up.
If you do want to, just before you go ahead, Billal, if you do want to join, raise a hand, either in Zoom or actually raise a hand, and then I'll come to you, but so that we can give Billal some time. Go on.
Sure. Okay. Firstly, thanks for the presentation. Kind of resonated with me, your training. Before I got into psychotherapy, I finished my master's in philosophy. So I'm coming at psychotherapy from also quite an existential sort of perspective. Sorry, can you hear me properly?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
It's just something you said towards the end of your presentation about when they'd be administering psychedelics in the sort of hospital setting, psychiatrists and psychologists.
Yeah.
And I think we need to really distinguish between how psychotherapists plan to do that, as I think you agreed upon, because for me, it is very much experiential, the whole psychedelic experience. It's an experience. So as much as you get these sort of chemical differences that sort of occur within your brain, I don't think that's going to have as much of an impact in being transformative as having a full-blown psychedelic experience. So I just wanted to get your opinion on it. But down the line with Ben Sess's sort of training program, do you think maybe it's going to become a bit too clinical and maybe a bit too kind of hospital-based? And this is my fear.
My fear. I hope it won't. I sort of trust Ben that it won't because I think he'll be wise to that. I don't get the sense he wants to, Ros Watts, I think it was, said that her idea is to have centres in forests, not hospitals, but there'd still be medical centres in forests. And maybe that's some sort of halfway to it. But otherwise, Bill, I want to agree with you. I think that's absolutely right that the risk is that it will be over medicalized. There's an over medicalization of distress at the moment. Things like I'm sad get turned into diagnosed depression, and this thing called clinical depression that is supposedly completely different to extreme sadness or despair, which is just a differentiation I don't recognize. So there's a medicalization of distress, which then has a medical response, which is drugs. And you're right. So your other point, I think, Billal, was about, for me, there's drug set and setting.
Yeah.
And where I'm at is that set is like at least as important as drug, like if not more. I actually think you could, a lot of the time, get rid of the drug and just have the set and the setting. And you would get more or less the same result. I don't know about that, but there's something in when you look at holotropic breathing, for instance, which is what Stanislav Grof went into after inventing the drug, after discovering it. After working with LSD. Grof, as a psychiatrist, did a non-drug based psychedelic therapy, and so there's something in that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for joining, Billal, and happy to answer any. Yeah, it's a good question. Well, let's have some space if anybody wants to come in. Yes, Chris R.
Oh, hey. Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Adam, for the presentation. It was really helpful.
Pleasure.
One thing I just wanted to add to what you guys were talking about, it'd be interesting to get your take on. I've recently discovered that there are a lot of startups. A lot happen to be located in Canada, I think, who they're kind of working to take psychedelics and alter them to make them, maybe like remove, hallucinogenic properties, stuff like that, and to make them more like drugs. Just curious what your take is on that, and if that's something you would see kind of as a viable pathway, or if you think that's kind of going against the cause, kind of.
I have to be a bit careful here. I think of myself increasingly as a scientist, so whether it goes against the cause or not isn't my first instinct. Good luck to them. If they can prove something, right? If they take the trip out of psychedelics, I know exactly what you're talking about. Then good luck to them. If they can prove it's helpful without the journey, and they can monetize that, and they want to invest in that, then I'm not going to get in the way. As I've said, I'm pluralistic. Really, it takes all sorts. And if they can, but I don't think they will. I think it's utterly wrong-headed. I think philosophically it's misinformed. So from where I'm sat and from what I know of the literature and my own experiences, a bit to Billal's point, they're on to nothing. They are not pursuing a productive line of inquiry. You're right about Canada. Awaken is Canadian, I believe. That's linked to it with Ben Sessa. Canada, American, venture capital is coming in to psychedelics. So, God, maintaining. I want psychedelics to be for everybody. Everybody. I'm Mancunian, right? I'm from Manchester. It's where the cooperative movement was started, right? So that's my working class sort of background. So I'll always care about that. But I also, when I say for everybody, I also include rich people in that for everybody. So I don't want to exclude anybody. And it takes all sorts. So if they want to pursue a wrong-headed research line of inquiry, then let's rule it out. Let's check that doesn't work. Whilst I, and maybe we, get on with curating an experience. This is what I'd like to do, really, is curate without, you've got to be careful of cultural appropriation, which is not giving due credit to the people of the jungle that have had hundreds of years, at least, of experience with this, but of inventing something new for a UK audience, let's say, which is genuinely ritualized and productive and takes you into the right places. The clinical trials, they have playlists. Some of them are on Spotify, which are, have a bit like Five Rhythms, if you're familiar with that, the dance, Five Rhythms dancing. This winter and this spring and this summer, things surge forwards, and then there's, it kind of drops back down. So playlists will tend to follow a kind of a journey process. My research also suggests that the experience, what people see, who they meet, what they hear, which spirits, what character of it, how scared they are, what they're scared of, is all absolutely intrinsic to what they get from it, what helps them then 2 years later to be living a happier life. So my research is focused on not proving that, because I don't know I don't know what's going to happen, but investigating that and seeing if that's the case.
Yeah, interesting. Can I ask one just really quick question?
I'll come to you in a second, James. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Can you speak just a little bit to, are you doing psychedelic assisted therapy today, or do you have,
no,
or do you have clients who are asking for it, or
several times a week?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for some reason, my webpage comes up if you search for psychedelic psychotherapist, which means I get a lot of inquiries for people looking for psychedelic psychotherapy. And the first thing I say on that page is, I don't offer psychedelic psychotherapy. It's just not a non-starter. To the extent I wish it was legal to do. I'm working towards legality. Maybe a good time to mention this book. This is Thomas Saz, Our Right to Drugs. I'm a big fan of Thomas Saz. He's quite anti-psychiatry. I'm not sure I'm fully with him on that score. But on the free market and libertarian attitude to drugs, I am. And he set this case out in whatever it is, 1970 something. So there's that. But yeah, I've forgotten the question now. What was the question?
Oh no, yeah, I was just curious if you performed it, or what, if it was your aspiration to eventually do it, or
yeah, that's right. No, I suggest people do your own research. Do your own research. If you want to take psychedelics, then you'd have to go somewhere else. But if you want to talk about taking psychedelics, then come to me, or any of the people that offer that sort of thing. So it's sort of broadly integration services. I'm working. I would love to be able to offer psychedelic psychotherapy. It fleets across my mind to work in a center in Peru or something where it's legal and permitted and all of that. But at the moment, I'm not. And as far as I know, no one can. It's not just me. Until the law changes, no one can offer psychedelic psychotherapy except under a clinical trial where it's licensed for research purposes. And those trials, you can look them up, but I don't think they're very easy to get onto.
Got it.
Yes. So let's come to James if you had a question, and then come back to Chris R.
Sure thing. Thank you, Adam.
He's got 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with this group today. You've mentioned a couple of times the importance of research, and you're increasingly seeing yourself more as a scientist. What are some of the big areas of worthy, kind of endeavor from a research perspective?
As in, what am I most excited about?
Yeah, excitement meets importance, however you assess that. Right.
My research is by far the most interesting and important. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of joking. I'm sort of not, because if it wasn't, I'd be doing the thing that I thought was more important than it. So for me, for my values, doing phenomenological research into the qualitative aspects of ayahuasca is really, really needed and really lacking. I'm happy that Carl Harris and David Nutt at Imperial are doing neuroscience scans in fMRI scanners and EEG. I'm happy for them. And the King's College, the studies they're doing with ketamine, they've done some MDMA, they're doing ayahuasca research now, kind of psychological tests. It's all important, I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't excite me, I suppose. Andrew Gallimore is a neuroscientist who, so his book, which is so he's made a book called Alien Information Theory by Andrew Gallimore, and he's just released a free course on YouTube of the neuroscience of psychedelics in like 8 modules, each with 6 lessons of half an hour each, which is really, really good and free. So that his research is really interesting. And what I like about that is that he's a neuroscientist, but he also really thinks that alien insects are talking to us. So it's that, it's that kind of what, sort of, that's what interests me. Yeah. Let's ask Chris R. Did you have a follow-up? I'm speeding up a bit because we're approaching the end. Yeah, I thought you would raise your hand. Did you not? Maybe it was. It was Chris Barker. It was Chris Barker. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Sorry. Hi, Chris.
Yeah, I was interested. I've just been reading recently about Silawaska or Pharmawaska.
Right.
Is that something which you have been interested by, or is there anything that you want to talk about with that?
What interests me most about it is that one study I read about Pharmawaska, I don't think this Silawaska, that would be a combination of psilocybin and ayahuasca. I've not heard about that.
No, Silawaska is magic mushrooms.
Yeah.
So psilocybin with Syrian rue, which is their seeds. You eat 3 grams of those seeds 40 minutes before eating the mushroom, and you get an 8 to 9 hour journey rather than the 4 to 5 hour journey, and it's sort of 5 times stronger.
Innovations in pharmacology, yeah. Well, so Pharmawaska is the subject of some of the studies on ayahuasca. One of the studies I read said that it decreases vomiting because of the lack of water content. So I thought that was interesting. That sounds good. The curanderos wouldn't agree. They think the vomiting is absolutely, the purging is what it's all about. But obviously, what it allows you to do is to you do the spinny thing where you work out what's in it. You can measure the DMT, the harmine, the harmolol, and the tetrahydroharmine to the milligram or better, and you know exactly what's in it, and then you can dose it on a kind of DMT milligram per kilogram of person to work out the right dose for people, which otherwise takes a period of experimentation, and it's a bit more trial and error with any given brew, and often you sort of don't know what you're taking because they just hand you the drink and it's like, well, good luck. So, there are arguments for Pharmawaska. There's arguments that, if it's not brewed with the Icaros being sung into it, then it's not ayahuasca. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Eddie, I want to hear from you. You've sat there for an hour and you're such an interesting person.
In rapt attention, though. So I had a couple of thoughts during all that conversation, but I don't think I want to pick up on anything, like the moment has passed. I'm curious to hear what you think about, you described the process of getting the certification as overcooked ethics, and it just like making sure people come into it with good intentions and they get in a rubber stamped by a body. I think there are huge amounts of challenges with regulating this space when it becomes more common. So one question, I guess, is how many people are excluded from that process because the board think they are wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. What a great, so as I understand it, Eddie, your specialist area is ethics, right?
Yeah, all right. I'm aspiring to be an ethicist, yeah.
Aren't we all? By the way, that's a thought I had when I said it. I've not really thought that through. I don't know. I'm fearing my being up against the ethics board now. I do sort of think that. Do I think it excludes people? Absolutely. God, who can afford 50 grand in 5 years to train as a psychedelic psychotherapist? Very few people. It took me. I thought of myself as having to achieve escape velocity from my previous career. And I was surviving on the vapors of the smoke of the last bits of money from my past career. By the time I just made it over the line, I just crawled over the line. And then I could start to earn money from being a psychotherapist.
No, I don't mean, obviously 50K is hugely exclusionary. Is it successful in terms of excluding people because they're dodgy, rather than because they're not sufficiently wealthy?
You're right.
So a bit more context here is regulating this space is going to be a huge challenge. Like, because on the one case, like, there are arguments for libertarianism and that these are gifts from God or nature. But thinking long term about this stuff, all we need is one person calling himself a shaman or therapist who abuses that power. It reaches the Daily Mail and everything is shut down. And this very slowly developed public credit or goodwill that we get is absolutely excluded. And then we've got another 40 years of effective feedback. But then on the other side, who the hell, like, should this just be state-approved psychiatrists that are, it seems unreasonable, especially considering their sacraments, right? To have the state saying, no, like, we have this agreement with Mother Ayahuasca and we're going to be in charge of saying who can give this out. Do you have any thoughts about what the happy medium between those two are?
I think, I will always have a bias towards the grassroots rather than the top down, the bottom up rather than the top down. And that applies to ethics as well. So I'd rather have community accountability than law, for instance. So Daimi, you know, if someone is in a community and they're getting into sexual abuse or something, they'd be called out. I get the sense they'd be called out by the community or thrown out of the community. And that seems to me perfectly legitimate. It's also aligned with what Carl Rogers says in this book. So he's got a great chapter in this, which I recommend to everybody, called, let me find it. So it's called, Some New Challenges to the Helping. Come on, camera. Some New Challenges to the Helping Professions. It's really struggling with that, isn't it? And then it's actually followed by the politics of the helping professions. And both of those are great reads on certification. Basically, he's saying, to your point, Eddie, there are lots of charlatans with certificates on their walls.
Yeah.
Basically, you don't necessarily exclude anybody because everyone's assumed to be. It's like the paedophile register, isn't it, or the sex abuse register? You know, you're assumed to not be until you make a mistake, and then you are. But that doesn't mean that if you're not on the register, you're basically okay. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means you haven't been caught yet. So, you know, it's but yeah, rather than the kind of heavy-handed, I get what you're saying about the Daily Mail, but I think we've got to have, you know, we'll never eliminate all road traffic accidents, right? The only way to not have any is to not have any cars. So it's going to be the same with psychedelics. We'll have to accept some level. Unfortunately, you know, we can reduce it, we can minimize it, but we'll never eliminate bad actors coming into this space. And then it's a question of how do we ensure accountability? You know, Carl Rogers just suggested you just have a register on the internet, essentially, saying this is a list of people that you shouldn't do it with, you know. So that's kind of where I start, and then I go up from there.
New blockchain application.
So say on the dark web, the dark web for like purchasing drugs, so I'm told, is actually superb for like user feedback on this sort of thing. And so like a blockchain style register of these things where
absolutely
victims, survivors don't need to risk.
But so for me, it would be peer based like blockchain is, and it would be trust based like blockchain is, and it would be based on user reviews like Amazon is, and you know, information can travel really fast around the world. So I really like that idea, and maybe we need to innovate rather than kind of have the ethics committee or reviewing your case, and you need to write a thing. Sorry, James, did you want to come in there?
No, it's fine. I just the similar idea came to mind straight away. It sounded like a new blockchain application.
I love it.
But I like that way of thinking about it and connecting with the grassroots.
I'm going to start to wrap up now. I will, Virginia. It's very nice to have you here. You've been very. If you want to say something, feel free. If you don't want to, it's absolutely fine. We'll move on. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Virginia.
That was fascinating. Thank you. I think that wherever you have vulnerable people going to a doctor, a shaman, a facilitator, whether it's for ordinary medicine or entheogens or whatever, or psychotherapy, there's always the risk of abuse. I love the idea of a blockchain for reviewing ayahuasca facilitators. I think that's a great idea. But that's something that we're never going to be able to eliminate. And there's a school of thought that might say that there's good medicine in everything. So we're never going to be able to prevent whether somebody has got a certificate or hasn't got a certificate. You're always going to have rogue people setting themselves up in that position of power and preying on vulnerable people. We just have to hope that that isn't prevalent. And it's already been in the Daily Mail, actually. Somebody I trained with, there was an article a couple of years ago about that. But the thing is, this will, even if this medicine was only allowed to be given by psychiatrists, it would just stay underground anyway. The movement is moving, and it's not... Yeah. It's not going to stop by any rules or laws. Otherwise, it's
a really good point. There would be more harm caused by that, because the harm reduction that you would have if it was legal wouldn't be available, Virginia. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that thought. Absolutely. Okay. Well, unless there's any other urgent queries, we've just gone over an hour, so I'm tempted to leave it there. Thank you all very much for coming. I'll stick a recording of this on YouTube in due course. And yeah, is that it? Anything else?
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Great idea, Adam. Appreciate it.
Oh, great to have you.
Thanks,
guys.
Adam. See you.
Thanks, Adam. Cheers.